Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 354, recorded live on Saturday, October 4th. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week we have returning Lich from Galanda.
Hey, hey.
And this week's screenshot is Wolvar Rigoni meeting Sinvala in the 191st screenshot of the week. That is from Mired in Kobolds. And I don't think the dragon is too happy to meet. This is my general view of how that's going. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Google Plus Hangouts, YouTube, or from our website at DDOCast.com. DDOCast is hosted by Cyber Ears, the awesome podcast hosting network. Shows are usually available within a few days of recording, and the next show will probably be Saturday, October 10th. You can stay updated by following us on our social media pages or our website, DDOCast.com. On the podcast this week, we're going to talk about Update 23, which has been released this week. So we'll give us some initial reactions to that. And then we're also going to talk about Clerics and building Clerics and how to go about that. And specifically, not so much a melee Cleric as opposed to casting and turning Clerics.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least the plan. Game news, Update 23 is out. You can find the release notes online. I'm not going to go through those. I didn't really see anything that stuck out that was different than Lomania. But there were a couple other things that kind of, some known issues that we'll talk about a little bit. There was one change that was kind of funny. The Exalted Smite animation, at least initially, got changed. I think that was fixed. But basically what happened was they went to add the plus 10 melee power effect when Smite Evil is used into Exalted Smite. And when they did that, they found that Exalted Smite was constructed improperly, and that's why it wasn't getting the benefit when used. They fixed the Exalted Smite animation as intended, and that was kind of a side effect thing going on. So basically, they went to go fix something, and they found something wasn't working the way it was supposed to, or they wanted to add something, found something was broken, and fixed it, and it changed, and people went, "Whoa, what?" That's basically the action there.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Indeed. Let's see, other stuff that's going on. The Harper agent tree, when you're spending points, you may need to press the accept button after spending every point in the tree. That will be fixed in an upcoming update. Mirror of Glamoring is not currently working on docents. That will be corrected in a future update. Technically, it's also not working on weapons and shields. But they didn't put that in the known issues list, which I thought was kind of funny. But they haven't technically released that either, so I'm not really sure how they're going about that. Anyways, the LFM panel is not properly displaying some leader names, or party member names for that matter. Basically, if you don't search the Who tab, the people in the parties don't show up. So you don't know who's in the parties or who's leading them until you search the Who tab. There's also a known issue that if you tell a hireling to stand the ground while they are defensive, they will now run over to you as soon as you are attacked. You need to collect passive and stand your ground to get them to stay while you run ahead and deal with traps and the like while creatures are around, and they're looking into that. Other things that were broken. They did a hotfix on Friday, and fixed a lot of things, like the Mark of Death raid now has a 20th completions list, and there was much rejoicing there. You'll retain pretty much wherever you already were. They fixed an issue that could cause some players not to be awarded loot from the end chest and Mark of Death raid. Basically what's happening there is you could overpopulate the chest. The chest effectively had a limit to the number of items it would put out at a time. And if everyone looted at the same time before other people looted, some people were out of luck.
I have a couple of range tunes, and I would be perfectly fine with them getting rid of all ammo drops and all healing kits, repair kits, chest garbage, basically. Especially in raids. Raids, you're just there for the mats and the loot.
Yeah, I could see leaving Thief Tools in. I don't know. What they really should do is come up with a viable use for healing and repair kits other than vendor trash. Because using them to get people up from incapacitated is pretty infeasible. Just from the standpoint that people generally don't stay in cap, and all you need to do is toss them any kind of heal or temporary hit points. Everything from a cure spell to cocoon to greater heroism to aid all give temporary hit points and generally get people up, unless they're below 10 hit points, which is possible now. But I mean, still nobody spends the time to actually heal skill or repair skill anybody up. So I would not be I would not be unhappy if those kits went away from the game entirely, unless they come within the release room. That'd be kind of good.
They are pocket lint.
Pretty much. Although the times that I've completed the raid so far, generally the stuff that was in there was I didn't really mind that was there. It seems to be I think it's populating a double roll essentially, so you can get twice as many items as you get out of a normal chest,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of nice, and they're pretty high level items too. So, anyways, let's see. I'm gonna skip the Mirror of Gunring stuff for a second. The key to the City Evening Star, they broke. They fixed it again, so you can now use it on airships again. Um, the quest arc for Epic Orchard of Macabre was also not giving out good loot, and has been fixed, including named items. My experience so far is when turning that in, you generally get at least one named item out of the pack, which is pretty neat. They fixed the problem that two-handed fighting and two-weapon fighting feats were no longer exclusive. They fixed Heart Seeds not dropping in the Epic Orchard, Giant Hold, and Three Barrel Cove quests if you're eligible, so that should be all better now. And perhaps one of the oddest ones I've read in a while, they fixed an issue that caused all effects that provide a +2 insight bonus to strength to instead provide a +3 insight bonus to intelligence. I don't know why it was intelligence and why it was +3, but it was pretty entertaining. And let's see, Mirror of Glamoring. So the Mirror of Glamoring had some problems. It was not creating the proper cosmetic, and they fixed most of that, but it was not retroactive. So if you created a cosmetic armor using the Mirror of Glamoring are not satisfied with the resulting cosmetic item due to a change in the item's look or coloring, you can contact support either in-game or through support.turbine.com. They fixed most of that. However, the Mirror of Glamoring is not working correctly with older randomly generated armors. Please do not use the Mirror of Glamoring on older randomly generated items while they fix the issue. New armors, say anything in the past year or two, and named armors should not be experiencing any further issues after the hotfix.
Yeah, I'm in that thread a couple of times. I tested that out, and basically on day one I used it, and I was getting the same problems that everyone else was having. But it was the color didn't stay on the blood plate. That was one. I had a couple of plain forged wondrous armors that looked okay. Tried it on that, and it was just a completely different kit other than the base skin. But I contacted account support the next day, and they were able to make good on the deal by me. So they're good support.
Yeah, there's some things to be expected with some bugginess with this. It's a huge new system essentially, and I think anyone who's expecting it to work flawlessly in the first go would be deluding themselves. It's good to hear that they are pretty well set up on the support side of that. And I've seen some support. I think over the past year or so has really gotten a lot better at dealing with some of that stuff. I know I had a problem for the second time where I couldn't, I lost all my Epic Destiny XP when I reincarnated, did an Epic Reincarnation.
Oh, right.
And it had happened to me before, and a GM was able to just give me the XP back. But this time around, it was actually much more refined, and it went a lot faster. There was another guy that I know online. He lost his tomes when he reincarnated.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't applying or something like that. The GM gave him a +6 ability tome or universal tome for stats and a bunch of skill tomes. And he was pretty happy with that and complained no more.
Yeah, from what I understand, the account support people are generally only going to be able to deal with your things like account support, basically anything like TP. That's about it. GMs are the ones that can actually work with items within the game. So either or, whichever suits your fancy, they should be able to help. But from what I've done after the patch, it's working pretty well so far. My cleric right now is wearing a accurate version of the blood plate. So it's pretty cool. I can't wait for the weapons and shields. It's gonna be nice.
Yeah, that's a lot of customization would be pretty awesome. Uh, I probably won't use a lot of mirrored glamourings. I'm not that big on cosmetics, and I think it's kind of funny that my cleric right now looks like the Wicked Witch of the West.
Hmm.
Um,
What's she wearing? The shadow?
the green scale, he has the green scale armor, and
Ah.
then he has the heavy plate green scale armor. And for whatever reason, when I got the wizard cosmetic hat,
Hmm.
I think they gave him out with one of the packs or something like that.
Right.
He ended up with it and wearing it for some reason or another, and I never took it off. Uh, so he's got the pointy witch hat and he's got a green skin. So it's you can
Yeah,
see his
the green
face.
armor looks good enough as is already. I mean, people are probably going to be making armor kits out of that alone. So if you're wearing it for the magical efficacy and all the other goodies, then yeah, it's pretty solid choice on the look cool factor front.
I think the only armor I've ever put on in the game where I went, oh dear lord, no, I'm not wearing that, was the docent out of Mindsunder, because it was kind of a pinkish,
Mm-hmm.
a pink bulky look on the Warforged, and I didn't like it at all. Um, I have nothing against pink other than it's not really a favorite color of mine, and it really didn't work on that character at all.
I think rainbowy colors like that are fitting for Shirati casters. You know, rainbows, crazy looking armor. I think
Yeah,
they're a good fit together. I might try and do that once docents are doable.
I respect pink, and I certainly appreciate that many people like pink. I am not one of them, and I'm okay with that, and I hope other people are too. Um, I do want to note too, with the Mirror of Glamoring, they're available mostly only in the store. You can get them in daily dice rolls. Jeff Hanna proved that. Uh, the Lucky Punk got another 100 on a cold daily roll 2 weeks in a row, uh, and got a Mirror of Glamoring this time as well. So just an FYI. So that's kind of the main newsy stuff about Update 23. Let's give our initial reactions on Update 23 here while we're in this section. What do you think so far of the update?
Excellent. I New quests. The loot is pretty good. There's some real missed opportunities, I think, in some of the pieces, but overall, it's loot upgrades for everything. I mean, if the camp on the forums that says every update uh, makes everything previous obsolete, they would have a solid argument here because a lot of the loot is best in slot, and you replace a lot of the stuff that you've been wearing since 21. But the raid could be a little bit longer for my tastes. But I mean, kind of nice that it's pretty quick compared to what we have been running Deathworm over and over again, which
Yeah,
is kind of a
I
lengthy
think
one.
it's good to have a variation in length of raids, which is certainly something good. Deathworm is pretty long. Um, the Abbot is it's pretty short if you're kind of ironed out. Although on Elite, I had some friends that were doing on Elite that I didn't make the run, but I think it took them a pretty fair amount of time. I've ran at least two normals in the time it took them to do the one Elite run, and
Yeah,
that
I believe
wasn't
that.
accounting the time that they failed either.
My guild's actually doing one in about 30 minutes that I'm missing.
Oh, we'll go
Be
faster.
here to participate and give tips on clerics because we need more clerics, especially now. And we'll go over the
Yeah.
reasons why.
I would say with the quests, my initial reaction, I didn't really have a problem with the quests. I like that they have a variation of the mobs that you're fighting. There's more of a variety within the quests themselves. Um, Having said that, I didn't really feel like the quests were new and exciting. It was kind of just an epic version of the old quests for the most
Mhm.
part. Although I will say the music was pretty slick. I noticed that
Definitely.
pretty quick. The music in these quests is pretty awesome. Um, I like the raid for the most part. I like how it's kind of a revisitation of the Abbot raid, and it incorporates kind of the three puzzle aspects: the goggles, the asteroids, and the ice wands
Hmm.
from before. There's a few mechanics about it that are a little, I think, are definitely a little on the challenging side. Well, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Um, I could see something a little longer, although the way the raid is structured, I think making it longer wouldn't be very good in that aspect because you have to. It's one of those things where you kind of have to split the party up and achieve a couple different tasks that can. So basically, the people that stay behind have to keep everything under control and keep it from spiraling out of control in terms of trash. Uh, so making it gets pretty chaotic. So having it shorter is pretty good. It's also nice to have a raid that you can run really fast and really enjoy. On the flip side, I have concerns that in a month or three from now, it won't be being run very much because people have raid timered the heck out of it and be done with it, which I think would be a shame. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think it'll get more play than the original Abbott did. I mean, the original Abbott didn't really hit its
Absolutely.
heyday until months and months after it came out
Years.
because, yeah, years, because it was just not doable in some cases for the group of people that were on at the time. I mean, you'd hear every once in a while a guild that would do it, but they were using some pretty hacky methods to do it, and generally it just wasn't something that a lot of people ran. Now you see a lot of people doing it just because there was the lead up to the patch, and people are getting their old loot, and it's all well and good. But I think this is going to be one of those that's going to get run by the more than casual players a lot immediately, and then I think it'll have some staying power because the flagging is a lot easier. So new players may not want to jump right into it, but it's going to be one of those that's fairly easy to get in and finish and not hate it.
And
Um,
it's short too, so even if you're done with it's not as big of a deal to go help some people out and run the raid, help your guild out and run the raid either. So
I think it's going to feel like Reaver did, the original, where you see one up, you go. See one up, you go. Fairly quick, easy to fill, easy to flag. Um, Epic elites are probably going to be few and far between, especially after all the big guilds that want to do it have done it. Unless there is a major difference in drop rates, I think people are just gonna go for raid timers or just run alts through it.
I would say the quests seem to have a pretty good drop rate on Epic Elite compared to Epic Hard. Hard runs, it's probably 50-50 whether or not you see an item. The Elite runs seem to have at least one or two items a chest, an end chest,
It's noticeable. It's a noticeable difference.
which is good.
Yeah, but I mean, really, effectively, if you've got people that need XP, if you've got alts, stuff like that, you can run those quests, which are really good XP on Epic Hard, uh, fairly quickly, and the chain reward gives you names like you said, so that's pretty handy right there. I mean, I'm probably going to run more chains later today just because I want to see that end list.
Yeah, I would say that the XP is a little hard to gauge right now because there's a plus 25 XP bonus going on, which
That's true. Yeah,
makes it a little misleading. But
it's
yeah, I think
great right now.
yeah, it's fantastic right now. It's great. Yeah, um, I will say this. We'll say that's the mirror again is not something that's really a big thing for me. Um, but I know a lot of people have been liking it. Um, there's the pre-cache thing that they're doing now with the launcher, which I know a lot of people have found to get them in the game faster, which is good. Although I think some people have reported that it doesn't actually fix the first crash problem. I think that's pretty good too. I haven't really had a chance to play with the Armor Up, Vanguard, or Harper Trees stuff because I just haven't run those characters yet. Um, but do know specifically with the Vanguard, there's a guy that was playing with that was really enjoying. A couple people actually really enjoying the Vanguard and Sword and Board style right now. So I think that's really good. I don't know if you've played with those yet.
That I only tested on Lemania, the Vanguard thing, and it was pretty good. it's good for a tank. I wouldn't take it over Swashbuckler. Flash a little bit here and there, but it's good for what it's for. It's not one of those multi-purpose trees, but Harper is pretty good. I got my Artie back in good form, and I go and play a Sharati caster. I go and play a cleric with a few tricks up his sleeve, or a high attack speed druid, or things like that. And it feels like Artie is definitely feeling like a support class. You want to do it all. Harper helps do it all. So right now, that's sort of the Artificer's temporary third tree at the moment. You can actually go pure, get some decent intelligence, and have effective spells. That being said, I'm probably going to still try and splash some Artie on the next life through a Paladin, because Paladins are crazy overpowered at the moment.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna splash Harper into my Artificer. I did run him today, but I didn't get a chance to do that before. I just kind of ran through the quest chain pretty fast, and he still seemed pretty powerful, given where he was at, even without the Harper tree. But I think that'll be a nice bonus for him. I have noticed the armor up with like my PRR numbers are up a little higher, and my MMR is pretty good. It's a little hard for me to gauge what the effects of that are because I've mostly only been running the new stuff.
Right.
So it's hard to compare it. And I would say that my characters are still getting smacked around a bit. Not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't feel like they're getting like one shot and just totally annihilated or anything like that. But I'm still taking damage, and it's still a fair amount of damage being taken. So
you don't feel invulnerable, which is good. I mean, the game needs
Yeah.
a challenge. The Doom Spheres, I've heard a lot of complaints about Doom Spheres doing massive con damage. I mean, they do 13 to 20 a hit per ray, and there's really no save for it other than absorb Doom Sphere spells. That's kind of good, though, because when was the last time you looked at a Beholder and said, oh no, a Beholder? You normally want to just run up to it and punch it in the eyeball. Well, now you might have to reconsider, because 2 Doom Spheres out in the orchard next to each other are going to drop your con to 0 in about 3 seconds. So you need to close the gap fast, or you need to take them out from ranged, and I like that, because Beholders are supposed to be scary. Also, the Liches, my brothers in arms in Ghosts of Perdition, have no save cleaves. You fall down all the time. And it does about, depending on the difficulty, up to about 500 damage a swing. And if you run into 2 of those, no save, fall down, dead instantly, have fun. They're kind of putting some challenge back into the game, which is good. The fact that it is no save feels a little bit hacky, just because what are we building characters for if you can just come in and say bang, you're dead, which is kind of what the Lich Cleave feels like. But it does make you think about what you're doing for a minute, which is good. So,
speaking of difficulty, there was a discussion on the forums about the ease of Epic Elite, which I wanted to kind of briefly touch on. This is from several and kind of where their stance is. A full group of good players with good gear should be able to do well in dungeons they've already learned, even on Epic Elite. And I would say that there's an intentional distinction. I'm kind of reading into what he's saying, but I think there's a distinction here between a really awesome players with the bestest loot in the game. Like, good players with good loot should do pretty reasonably well. There's 2 discussions kind of going on. The first is whether Epic Elite in the game as a whole is too easy, and the second is whether the Epified Orchard of Macabre is too easy on Epic Elite. To the first, if Power Creep has made Epic Elite easy enough game-wide that players have trouble finding challenge, he doubts they'd make large changes to all Epic Elite dungeons. They might tweak Epic Elite and then work to make sure players could find challenge from the content marked Extreme Challenge from some of the raids that were traditionally considered to be designed to be difficult. To the second, they think the raid is probably difficult enough, but we certainly can examine whether the dungeons and landscape features need to be tweaked. And I would say that the raid seems sufficiently difficult to me on Epic Normal. I haven't run anything hard on Epic Normal yet, but
Yeah, it can get hairy real fast as long as, I mean, if people let it run too long and let the spawns pile up, it can become insurmountable,
I think
and you definitely want intercession ward, but we'll talk more about that later.
the tip that I would give if you're running the raid and trying to figure some of the stuff out, at least on Epic Normal, what I found is the Abbot doesn't have a ton of hit points. Um, Focus most of your party on trash and have a few people assigned to the Abbot, and that seemed to work pretty well for us. You don't need a lot of DPS on the Abbot. It's more about keeping the trash manageable, particularly the Quals and Beholders. And also, something I wanted to mention kind of as a PSA, I didn't see anything in the release notes or known issues about it, but I've had at least a couple instances where I was unable to pick up the raid because I had reacquired a quest. So reacquire the Orchard quest at your own risk. It may prevent you from getting the raid. Um, I can definitely say like I've had that problem with at least two characters. I'm not sure if you can reacquire the raid later or if it's just the first time yet. But be aware of that.
On a Before I forget, on a little note on update 23, the Harper tree, you'd mentioned that was bugged. It goes blank after you spend 1 point. You have to accept each individual change. If you want to do something else, it also works to unspend all your points and move which shelf the Harper tree is in. So if you just unset your Harper tree and then change another one of the tabs to be Harper tree, then it works as normal. But once you accept, that's when it goes wonky. So move the tab, spend all your points, accept, and you're done. You don't have to do 1 point accept, 1 point accept, 1 point accept. Also, another note on that one, I played with that on Lemania and it was great. I'm really wanting ranged power on my Artie right now. I think I'm going to have to go melee and spellcasting instead of repeater and spellcasting. And it's kind of irky because my repeater is where I invested most of my raid loot, which was for the Mortal Fear. And it just feels like I'm lagging a little bit behind on other classes that I run. So
I would say don't get too reactionary about the range power thing because they wanted to add melee power and see where everything was at and then kind of look at where they wanted to add range power to keep the balance. They didn't want to just add a bunch of stuff all over the place at the same time for a couple of different reasons. So I would say be careful doing a knee-jerk reaction with that.
Well, I'm just saying I'm going to have to sit here for 3 months and basically not play ranged compared to other DPS options. But it's not something that I'm going to cry too hard about because I have no problem re-rolling. I mean, that's kind of our thing.
That's fair.
But yeah, it's okay. It's just a little bummed, I guess. Range power was supposed to come in the Harper tree, and it did, but it's, I think, a lot lower than what it was originally. Right now, you can get 7 ranged power from that tree for 7 points. That number might be wrong. It's something low, but maybe it's up to 9. But on the Mania, when they were originally putting it up there, I think it was 3 per point spent. So it seemed a little bit high because you get the USP and the melee power, but it resulted in a net gain of something like 20 more points of range power, and 20% of damage is a big amount when you're talking about straight numbers. So I think that's what kind of bummed me out a little bit on the Artie, but the ARP tree overall is pretty great as far as letting you use intelligence because it really opens up a lot of build options. You know, if you don't want to go strength and dex on a tune that uses intelligence as a primary stat, like maybe a wizard, if you want to do a melee wizard now, you can without having to spread your tune too thin at the build phase.
Which is definitely good. I wanted to share this picture here. This was a picture from I think it was Severlin. They were trying to figure out what was going on with the raid chests in Mark of Death. So he spawned a lot of them, and many people had some great comments about that, and things about, oh, there's where the raid loot went, and there was even some suggestions about this being a screenshot of the week somewhere, which I thought was a pretty good suggestion myself.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a pretty funny little
When I
little
first
shot
saw
there.
that, I thought it was a bug, like someone had run into that in a raid, and I was like, oh man, wouldn't that be nice to see in live?
Wow, I think yeah, there would be a little bit gleefulness there. Bonus days for the week, kind of already mentioned. 25% Epic XP this weekend, and double daily dice through Sunday, October 5th. The store stuff for the week until Thursday. 20% off of monster manuals, Slayer count boost, creature companion name changes, and creature companions and accessories. You can get 20% off all of that stuff. And the freebie for the week is a greater remove negative level potion times 1. The code is GRNLP2. You get 1 per account. I didn't actually even know that that item existed in the store, personally, because I don't use them. See, the Chronicle, 112th Chronicle of the week. Sith continuing his video series looking at the Pyrene Paladin. Let's see, DDO guys I think they're a Twitch group. They're doing Lord's Mart and Giant Hold in their latest Let's Play. Enrique looked at the Cults of the Six. The guild for the week was Raven's Guard on Thelenis, looking for people to join who are a good fit. It's small but passionate about DDO and works together to achieve their goals. The question for the week: would you rather be an intern with the Silver Flame or the Emerald Claw, and why? I'd probably go with the Silver Flame just because I'm kind of more of a good person than an evil person, but that's just me.
An intern?
An
Like a
intern.
clerical intern?
I'm not sure.
Ew, I'd have to say neither. If I had to pick one, I'd go with Silver Flame just because it seems like the safer bet, but they don't seem very pious in the Update 23 either.
They seem to be a little overzealously pious, whereas the Emerald Claw seems to be. I feel like you'd be a little. Let me put it this way, just because I was thinking about Harry Potter and watching some movies this week. I think the Silver Flame would be kind of like picking Dumbledore. You're kind of picking the quote good guy, but you kind of have to wonder if his kind of plans and machinations are kind of gonna hose you over in the end. Whereas the Emerald Claw would be more like Voldemort, and you kind of have to watch your back a little more. That's kind of where I'd go with it. Let's see. DDO Players is a new fan site highlighted in the Chronicle. We talked about them last week, and there'll be more on them. They actually had their first DDO Players podcast. Roll for Initiative was their first episode, and we'll link to that in the show notes. I gave it a listen. It seemed like a good group of folks. I would say they focused. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily indicative of how they're going to do the shows, but they focused a lot more just on the news and the reactions to it and kind of what they were doing in the game. And it was pretty evident, and this is not at all a critique or anything bad about them, but it's very evident that they are kind of newer, or at least approaching it from a newer perspective. They don't have they don't have the same kind of background and experience with the game that most of the people who are on DDOcast or Cocktail Hour do. So it's kind of a nice, fresh approach and viewpoint from where they're coming from. I think a lot of them, I don't know if any of the people that were talking about it had really been playing much before the game went free to play. I think one of them was in beta, but didn't stay in the game too long because wasn't sure about the subscription thing or was playing another game or something like that. But it was a good listen and had some an interesting perspective compared to what you'll find here on DDOcast, since they're not as aged and seasoned in the game, we'll say.
Seasoned.
I don't know. I've been playing this game for a long time, so I have a much different perspective than someone who's only been playing the game very much for a year.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying anyone wasn't seasoned. I was just thinking seasoned, like steaks.
Steak.
Not seasons.
Let's see. There was an community update video which pretty much covered everything that was in the Chronicle. There was a weekly Wednesday video of Epic Orchard and Ghost of Perdition, and the Fall Fling this week went to CO6 Part 2. And that was pretty much the news for the week. So we're going to talk about Clerics. And I think I'll start, and what we'll do, we're going to discuss Clerics a little differently. We've done builds in the past. At least I've done builds in the past. We're not going to go too much into detail with our builds, partly for time's sake. I'm hoping to try to cut down on show times a little bit overall. And what we're going to do, I'll start and just kind of give an overview of how I play my Cleric, at least currently. And then I'll have Lich do the same. And then we'll kind of go through different aspects of building a Cleric. And we're specifically going to be kind of talking about more casting and healing Clerics. And I know Lich has some more experience with turning on a Cleric. But we're not really going to be talking about a battle Cleric. And I'll do that on another show. My Cleric is the primary kind of focus for him is healing. Pretty much goes, most of his choices are made with that in mind over something else. But he also uses casting to supplement that. Mostly what that looks like today is a little bit of Blade Barrier, some Divine Punishment for shorter bossy kind of fights, Energy Burst, and Implosion. A little bit of DCs are kind of in there with Evocation to kind of supplement all of that. But it's kind of mostly a healing Cleric. That's kind of his primary focus. So a lot of the choices I make first try to address that. So he's pretty heavy in Radiant Servant and a little bit in Divine Disciple as well. Lich, what's your kind of Cleric going for?
Mine's pretty similar, except it is more of a charisma spec and all of the differences that go with that. And it relies on a few tricks up its sleeve at the moment, which I wouldn't technically classify as exploits, but extra good benefits for the content that we run nowadays. And I only say that because it seems like something may not be working intended here, so we'll go over the details. And if it goes away, I'll probably switch over to something similar to your build, Patrick, just because DC is definitely viable. We have a few good DC Clerics, not as many as we need on Galanda, and it's going to be pretty handy to use an implosion that works right now, which was one of the Update 23 fixes.
I don't know if this is intentional, but you can implode Doom Spheres. The non-made one.
Sounds okay to me. I mean, you can turn undead Doom Spheres.
Well, I thought Doom Spheres were incorporeal, which, generally speaking, you can't implode things that are incorporeal. It needs to have a body. You can implode something that's undead, unlike Whale, which doesn't do anything against undead. But
there's got to be something semi-corporeal if you only miss half the time. Know what I mean?
I don't know. I'm not used to seeing things that are incorporeal implode, and I thought that was not supposed to happen. But anyways,
it's magic.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about stats. For me, strength and dexterity and intelligence are pretty much dumb stats. I think basically my basic stance was I think it took 16 wisdom, probably 14 con, and like 14 charisma, or 16 and 14, something like that. I didn't focus too much on charisma, but I don't use turning hardly at all, if ever. I use my turns for the Radiant Servant aura and bursting. So I don't tend to, and with all the regen you can get on Turn Undead, I tend not to worry too much about having a lot of turns, which is, I don't know, are there other benefits really to having more charisma than turning?
Well, each modifier point is an extra use. So there's that. Turn Undead does determine your the charisma in the Turn Undead still uses the pen and paper chart. So it's not a straight relationship like many would originally assume, especially if you don't actually look really tough into it. But we'll get into that more, but the short answer is no. Charisma build benefits are Splashing Paladin for the extra saves and a good Draconic Burst DC, because Draconic Burst only works off your Charisma and your Intelligence, or Wisdom.
Right. I think when you're talking about 1-to-1 point for build point for charisma, that works out pretty good. When you start spending 2 points for charisma, unless you're really focusing on turning, which I have seen people do really effectively, I think you're kind of missing out a little bit on other opportunities.
On a
But I think,
traditional caster cleric, I'd say you're definitely on the mark with that. I wouldn't get into anything that starts costing more than 1 point.
which I think is pretty much the approach I took. I think I got like 16 wisdom, 16 con, 14. That sounds about right. Something to that effect. Um, if you have a little extra points, you can maybe bump your intelligence up. Ever since they added spellcraft, I found a cleric to be lacking in skill points, and my cleric's a human as well, which gives you an extra skill point. And I found that I could use a few more skill points than I have of late. I think in terms of race, I like human for clerics. I know some people have liked drow for clerics, particularly if you're going to focus on turning. Although that tends to be more of a flavor thing. Uh, I've seen the odd Warforged and kind of never really understood why you'd pick a favored soul or a cleric over a favored soul for a Warforged these days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you do tend to overheal. Like, if you heal and you're really spec for positive, you're going to overheal yourself if you actually use a heal. So they can afford to not be fleshy and take that extra hit. But I think they just want the benefits that come with being a construct, which is neg level immunity.
Yeah, there's good reasons to be a Warforged. You just don't see very many clerics as Warforged. Usually they're going to be a Warforged and Divine, they usually pick favored soul. I don't know. I've seen halflings. A lot of people like halflings. I think that was more to do with the old Dragon Mark line than anything else. I don't know. There are other races that kind of stand out for you. Dwarves work pretty well because you can get some extra constitution, but you lose the
Yeah, they're
charisma.
pretty hardy. They're good for tanky setups.
Indeed. Let's talk about class split. I'm pure, but I know a lot of people like to split. Paladin is a strong choice, particularly if you're going with charisma. Um, there was a split that was going around for a while that was, I think it was 17, either 17 cleric, 2 monk, and 1 wizard, or 18 cleric, 1 monk, 1 wizard, which was pretty popular for casting. Because you could go into wisdom or to water stands to get some extra wisdom and get a bonus meta magic feat from the wizard level. Um, those are kind of popular splashes. There was a Clonk build that I haven't really seen many people playing for a while. That was 17, 17 cleric, 3 monk. It was kind of more of a battle cleric, so it's a little outside of our intended frame of discussion. But that was a popular one for a while. Are there other popular mixes that you like to see, you've seen?
Well, I think the main problem with the Clonk at the moment is it takes a lot to get your saves into the viable evasion range if you're not going with any more splash than that. So I think we have a better option with Update 23 and Armor Up, and that is the PRR MRR route.
Which is actually what I did.
Yeah, I mean, you have the heavy armor feat, you might as well throw something on. But with a Paladin Splash, you get the extra saves, and I know that Divine Grace got added to the known issues list, that it's allowing more than 8, which is kind of funny. It's basically, it's considered an issue and not a design change, but basically it's a design change. Probably a good design change because, in my opinion, because it's a lot of bonus for a little reward, for a little investment.
Although
So
I think you could certainly make an argument that splashing 2 levels of monk to get evasion from certain builds is a lot of benefit for 2 levels too. So
yeah, and well, 2 monks with the feats or 2 rogue for evasion and trapping. Which one do you want? So yeah, they're kind of rolling that back, but still, I think it comes out to 8 total bonus on their predicted chart. It may change, but your increase is going to be lessened from your charisma bonus by divine grace. I still do it right now though, because what I run is charisma, and you can still, even if you do a wisdom based cleric, you can still get a lot of benefit out of those saves. I think with orb at the moment, if I'm shifting, that is shield blocking with an orb, my fortitude is in the 80s, so that's kind of handy for liches that like to throw disintegrates.
Yeah, I think let's see. I should do the math while we're talking about builds because you get even at standard 32-point build. That's what is that? 3 16s and a 10 in stats, something like that. So you can spread those points around. If you don't max, and I think I've taken this approach on a lot of my builds. If you don't max that primary stat up to an 18, you save 6 points from going from a 16 to an 18, and you're only getting a net +1 modifier. Whereas you can get a net +3 modifier if you put it somewhere you don't have anything invested, which I think is a pretty good approach. One DC, in my opinion, generally doesn't make or break a build. I know if people would disagree with me.
Yeah, I mean that's how I do it all the time. I rarely ever go into the top 2 just because they're so expensive. I did it on my Artie just to try it out, and his DCs are still not worth doing, for me at least.
It's certainly a trick because you have to weigh the benefits of doing that, and the way that DDO and D&D works is +1 isn't a whole lot, but when you get +1 15 times, it's suddenly a lot. Like that's kind of how the mechanics of building work. So you kind of have to play with that. But I think for building, particularly if you want more than like 2 or 3 stats, stopping at 16 is usually a good approach.
Yeah, unless that is your only trick, and I think the only classes that can afford to do that right now are wizards, maybe clerics, but mostly
Even for
wizards.
clerics for the most part. Wisdom and constitution and a little splashing into charisma.
Yeah,
I mean, that's essentially what mine is. He might
DC
actually have
wizards,
18
yeah.
wisdom. I think about it, but
I think they're the only people that have the most valid reason to go into those upper points because they don't really have to spread them out elsewhere. Other classes that want casting and health and strength, they have to spread them out, and you really want those 6 points back. So
indeed,
it's something to think about.
2 things I want to say before we'll talk about class splits and we'll move on. One thing with the Clonk is it's kind of an older build before the new enhancement system kind of came around. So that was part of the reason with that class split. And the other thing I haven't seen it for a while, but cleric, 18 cleric and 2 rogue, I have seen those people actually do pretty decent at trapping. I don't know how well they would do in today's kind of epic trap environment, because the DCs are certainly push what a trapper can do more so than they have in the past, but that was also something that was kind of popular. People that wanted to kind of do a lot more and have trapping skills and do healing. So that's something to consider.
If all you run is epic normal, you're perfect. It will. I mean, if you just like blasting through stuff and you want to get that extra trap bonus, it's definitely worth taking. But I wouldn't get your hopes up too high unless you can take some ranger levels or more rogue levels, basically, to get your total search up. Search is the real factor there. But funny thing about the epic elite traps in the new stuff, we actually noticed this, that one of our guildies, Artificer, he had such a high disabled device that he actually rolled over the meter and critical failed when he got about a 130 on an epic elite trap. So he said, oh, well, I'm going to have to take some gear off because this does not critical fail if I get a 110.
That's kind of funny.
So, yeah. Fair warning there, but it's kind of neat that you can actually get that high and confuse the game into breaking.
It's kind of amusing. Let's talk about feats. Because this is, and I think you can go a lot of directions with feats with a cleric. And I've gone a few different directions with the feats on a cleric, actually. Um, I would say if you're gonna focus on being a primary boss healer, and I use the word bosses and really impressively healer, not necessarily doing boss fights, um, Empower Heal is going to serve you really well. Um, it's a better bang for the buck in terms of spell point costs increase to spell power increase. It only works on positive spell power. Um, there's also a couple of enhancements in Radiant Servant that kind of work off of Empower Heal as well. Um, having said that, I generally still have Maximize. Definitely take Quicken. You're going to want Quicken because you're going to get hit while you're trying to cast Healing, and that doesn't ever go well when that fails. Um, and then, I generally take Extend myself. Uh, I'm not even sure if I could completely articulate why I do, other than I have the feat slot for it. And then there's I think you generally have like 3 lines you can kind of go up. There's Spell Penetration, Spell Focus, and the Mental Toughness line are kind of the 3 lines, and you pretty much can pick 2 of those and really nail them out of the park. The reason why the Mental Toughness one is nice, not just for the spell points, but it gives you spell critical chance. Not a lot, but it gives you some. And I think these days I have the Evocation line and the Mental Toughness line. I guess if you're gonna go turning too, there's some turning options in feats as well.
I wouldn't argue for any of them really.
Fair enough.
Once we get into the crunchy bits, I'll explain. But yeah, the only thing I might add there is Enlarge. A few guildies of mine swear by it, just because you can heal across the arenas, the big arena fights. I don't use it because I typically like to place myself in the middle of everything by looking at the map and seeing, here's a cluster of blue dots. I want to be in the direct center of that cluster of blue dots so that I have range on everybody. Some people would say I want to stand as far away from those blue dots as possible and throw a further heal. But I've got Cocoon for that until that gets... it seems like it's not working as intended because that thing works through walls. It works over any amount of distance. And it's great. I really enjoy it. Please, nobody fix that. But Enlarge is a good feat to take if you like to stay completely out of combat, which is, it's a playstyle thing, really.
Yeah, I've never used it, and I've known of some people that have really liked it. I generally alleviate that problem by moving, and I think I tend to be a more mobile cleric than most folks tend to play their clerics. I see a lot of people, particularly folks that maybe don't have as long of a history with raids as I do, tend to stand and heal a little bit more often, whereas I tend to move a lot while I'm healing. And it's not to say that I don't ever run into range issues, and it's not to say that doesn't cause people to die. It's not something I've ever invested in myself. I would also mention that a wizard past life, the past life feat that gives you +1 to DCs can be a benefit as well. The reason why I kind of stopped taking the spell penetration line is partly because, generally speaking, if I was running into anything that had spell penetration, it was particularly in epics, it was generally had high spell penetration, like Drow, which I wasn't bypassing for the most part anyways.
Yep, it takes a lot of investment to get past that.
Yeah, and it just wasn't worth it, particularly when I was generally having more effectiveness killing stuff with Blade Bearers and Draconic Burst. Not to say that Implosion wasn't being effective, but the places where spell penetration wasn't working, I just kind of get around it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about it too much. Not that it's bad, but I found better uses for the feats.
Most things that you play against now, unless you're on the Epic Reincarnation train, you're not going to see a whole lot of that anymore. So if you, depending on what content you play, you can say, well, I'm not really going to run into much drow or demons that have spell resistance, so I can actually just sack all that and go heavier into something else.
I would say spell penetration works pretty well in heroic, particularly when you get to the devils and demons and stuff like that.
Definitely, yeah.
Um,
It's a must-have in that content.
so if you're running kind of a more of a heroic life and you're not really going to go too far into epics, um, I would say spell penetration is probably better than the mental toughness lines because you can really get some, particularly at late heroic game, you can really get implosion to work really well on a lot of stuff, and you can bypass that spell resistance pretty easily. Once you get into epics, I think spell resistance has kind of becomes a little, particularly if you're doing an epic elite, it's almost not worth trying for.
Yeah, you might just want to find something else that's more reliable. It might work every once in a while, but when it's a roll and you have 3 things running at you, you're going to realize real fast that you need something that is more reliable.
Again, not necessarily a bad choice, but you got to make the choice. You know, I would say yes, take the DCs, evocation DCs, um, just because you get more blade barrier and implosion are evocation, and I think draconic burst is as well. Um, and that tends to give you the best bang for your buck for your DCs. And then either the mental toughness for the spell criticals and extra spell points, or spell penetration, depending on where you're kind of at and what you like better. So we talk about enhancements.
Sure thing, and I'll let you just roll off what you got, and then if I have comments, I'll hold them till the end as I'm going through mine, just to
Fair enough.
Keep it all encapsulated.
My cleric does not use the war priest one. My favorite soul does. We're not talking about my favorite souls. Although I will mention that if you want it, the first rank of war priest will give you +5 fire and +5 light spell power for one shot, which can be kind of nice. I think mine has a few investments into human, just because he's human. I think there's you can extend your in-cap range or something to that effect. Although I don't remember quite off the top of my head. Radiant Servant's kind of the main tree, and because mine is built more for healing, I like the capstone in this tree, even though it's probably overkill. Since every 5th positive spell you cast deals maximum healing and has a 50% chance to critical, which is really nice. There's things in there that just the core part gives you plus 100 positive spell power off of Empower Healing, as opposed to 50, or sorry, 75, which is nice. There is a pacifism that's a stance that gives you plus 25 spell power and extra critical, but it reduces everything else's spell power and criticals, and you do less damage. I don't tend to use that very often myself. As far as going up the tree, I still take wand mastery. I know this has been a point of contention a couple times on the show. I still use wands wands and scrolls occasionally. It's more for scrolls than anything else than wands. But there are times where I like to be able to use scrolls, so I still take that. I tend not to take turning unless I need to spend points to advance, or at least I'll take the extra turning. I don't take the improved turning. Or the mighty turning, which destroys undead. I generally don't take any kind of channeling stuff. Again, I pretty much exclusively use my turns for the radiant aura and the burst. So I pretty much ignore turning unless I need to spend some action points somewhere. Let's see. There's an efficient empower healing that I use. It decreases the spell cost there. I like the intense healing, which gives you more cast level on your positive healing spells. Unyielding Sovereign is kind of a funny one. So it exists in Tier 3 of the Radiant Servant Tree. It's also a free feat. It's now a free feat for Clerics at level 6. And I'm almost positive that the enhancement one and the feat one have two different timers. So you can have two unyielding sovereignties, um, which the only place I find that to be useful, the only place I find it to be useful ever, is in a raid. And having two of those on two different timers is pretty slick. Um, let's see. I did take the endless turning, which lets you regenerate your turns faster, mostly so I can use the auras and bursting. Uh, I used to have reactive heal, which was in tier 5, but I don't anymore. At least I don't think I do anymore. If I do have it, I don't use it very often because I kind of forget about it. And again, I tend to exclusively use the aura and the bursting for my channels. Um, and then the cure focus at the top of the tree gives you cure spells, have no maximum cast level, which is great for mass heals. Do you want to go through Divine Disciple too, or do you want to comment about Radiant Servant now?
I will. I'll just go through my build, and then I'm trying to remember what extra tips and tricks there are, because we're probably going to cover the same stuff. And I'll just give the differences.
Okay, I'll
Um,
go through. I'll go through Divine Disciple real quick then.
yep.
Um, and generally speaking, for this tree, I didn't take very many of the core ones. I was kind of just cruising up the tree a little bit. Um, I take the universal spell power as opposed to the light and negative, because I'm not. Again, I'm more of a positive spellcaster than a light spellcaster. Although that's certainly an option there. And that kind of you get more out of those points than if you just spent them in the Radiant Servant tree. Which, if you want to go nuts with the heal power, that's kind of a neat trick. Um, every point you spend in Radiant Servant, you get one positive spell power plus an additional 0.5 universal spell power, um, which makes that tree really strong in terms of spell power. And again, I kind of won't go for the universal spell power. It also helps your blade barriers and your the energy burst really well. In addition to that, and it still boosts your. It's about half as effective for the light spell power. A little more than half of what you get out doing light spell power.
Do you go up for the positive energy aura? Is that your tier 5? Or
In Radiant Servant, yeah.
okay. Um, I just wanted to know. Do you have any idea about how many points you're spending there
Um,
total?
well, I definitely have at least 41 points spent in Radiant Servant because I have the capstone in Radiant Servant as well.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Again, because it's a healing cleric. That's the first thing he wants to do. Um, if you want to be more DC, you can go up the Divine Disciple, which will give you some extra. It gives you +3. Or no, sorry. It gives you +1 to your DCs because you get +2 Wisdom. I think the other one does as well, though. It gives you spell power and light spell power. So I don't think there's really much in DCs and Divine Disciple. It's kind of just light spell powers, or negative spell power is kind of its main thing. But again,
Hmm.
I use it more for a universal supplement, right?
Right.
I find that I get more because I use Blade Barrier and Energy Burst a lot more often than I use the Divine Punishment. Because Divine Punishment, it costs to use all the meta magics on it, so it's not as cost effective and damage wise um, over a short term. If you're doing a longer boss fight, it really starts to kind of kick in, but it can still be really mana intensive.
It's still a really high damage per spell point spent
Absolutely,
over the long run, but if something's going to be dead, you just wasted a lot of SP.
exactly, and that's kind of why that's the only light spell I really use. Now you can get the light stuff out of the Divine Disciple, which can be really effective for sure. Again, I tend to use Universal because that's where I'm getting more of my stuff from. Uh, so that's just kind of the direction I go is with the Universal stuff. I also take the ones that make meta magics cheaper. And as a general note, if efficient maximize is on that list, I take that first because it reduces your spell points more than the other meta magics. Um, and I think that's kind of the way that I approach that tree. I I did take the invocation DCs out of that tree, and that's kind of how I went through that tree. So why don't you talk? What do you use for your enhancements that's a little different?
Did you use any in racial?
I think so. I'd have to look up. I didn't really look at my cleric too
Human,
much
I
before.
would assume you're probably using the heat lamp, maybe? That
Yeah,
ring a
I
bell?
didn't invest very much. I can tell you that much. I got the spell power boost, just because it was the best boost that I could
All
get
right.
out of the versatility, which is kind of nice. Um,
Maybe some stats.
the improved recovery, and then the don't count me out, which increases your range of unconsciousness by 20 hit points.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Um, and you also get extra PRR while you're below 50% health, um, which
Yeah,
just kind of
that's
helps
handy.
keep you alive, which is good as a healer. Can't heal if you're dead.
Yeah. Um,
But I didn't go above tier 1.
okay. I was just wondering. Um, on my enhancement points, a little disclaimer. I'm Morning Lord, so that's the race. And the thing about this type of build is it's basically heavy in the charisma, not so much light in the wisdom. Still, there's some wisdom there for basically blade barrier DC, um, but a little bit just so that certain spells are usable in epic normals that would normally not be if you didn't have anything invested into it. But as far as enhancement points go, I only go about 4 AP into Morning Lord because they have the enhancement that increases your caster level for purposes of turning undead, Bane of the Restless. Um, you count as 6 levels higher when turning undead.
Which is a
So,
lot.
yeah, to put that in perspective, that is the equivalent of 3 cleric past lives. So you can basically just roll up a new Morning Lord, and it is as if you have 3 cleric past lives as long as you spend the 4 AP to get it. That being said, it stacks with 3 cleric past lives, so why not have both? Go play cleric a lot. If you like cleric, you can get the extra past life stuff. It's also kind of it's a good benefit for cleric past lives, but that's kind of why cleric past lives aren't as attractive to most players, because that is a very specific purpose. It doesn't give you any extra uses, which would be really handy if it did. It's just you count as that many levels higher. Um,
Can I point out too, I don't have a lot of familiarity with this one, but the wiki at least says that you add an additional number of hit dice that you can turn, so you can turn more stuff.
yep.
And it also does light damage?
I think that's the it is the same as Cleric 2. Um, that'll come into the breakdown later, but basically what it equates to is if you are getting your levels up for turning, it's going to turn out to be about half of the check level. Not half, double. So, for instance, if you can achieve a 57 turn HD number, then the amount that you can turn is based on a scale that has 2d6 in it, but it typically ends up around 107 to 115. So what that means is if you have 3 kobolds that are all CR 50, which is two-toed Tobias, Epic Elite, you hit turn undead, and you will see 2 of those go away. The other one will have an effect on him. He'll probably get hit with the light damage that comes with it. But he's not going to get turned because that's what the turn HD max is. Typically, monsters have HD that are equal to their CR, hit dice equal to their challenge rating. So you'll see them go away if you have Mighty Turning. You'll see them sit still and actually behave turned as the turn ability. But typically you're only going to get about 2 things. In Epic Hard or Epic Normal, that big max HD number just determines how many things can I go kill, or how many things can I actually turn and stun. So that's what that number is. It's handy, but it's not a huge deal because, like I said in that 50-50-50 example, it's the difference between turning 2 and 3, and when the difference is 50 total HD, then a little bit here, a little bit there really doesn't matter. As long as you're clearing 2, you're fine. Now to get into the other trees, I'm pretty similar in Radiant Servant. I don't have the points to work on efficient meta magic, but those are definitely good investments. And I'm really low on spell points in a charisma build. That's something to keep in mind. But my class split is 18 Cleric, 2 Paladin. 2 Paladin is obviously for the saves, like we discussed earlier, but the 18 Cleric is also a huge part of this. 18 Cleric minimum for what I'm doing is required. Radiant Servant is 4 points in the core up to improved Empower Healing. The extra Empower Healing is good for the same reasons that you stated, Patrick. Except I go up, instead of the right side of that chart, I go up the left side. I go extra turning, 3 turn attempts per rest. Improved turning, I count as 3 levels higher. And mighty turning, which is a big linchpin in the turn undead. You have to have that. Otherwise, your turns will just stun something, they'll sit there, they'll eventually wake up and kill you. And then on endless turning. Now there are 2 variants to this. You can go Radiant Servant as your tier 5, or you can take the tier 5 out of Divine Disciple if you like SLAs. I personally like to be able to squirt heals without even thinking about it, and I like to stand in the middle of the group, so Positive Energy Aura is the way to go. Also, pro tip, Positive Energy Aura also triggers any healing spellcasting effects per tick. So things like, can't think of them off the top of my head. Divine Crusader has one. Let me look it up.
The Exalted Angel has one as well.
Empyrean Magic. That basically means that if you have Positive Energy Aura going, you always have the full benefit of Empyrean Magic because it stacks up. Same thing with Favored Soul Light Archons. Just a little side note there.
The thing with that aura on the same note, it works with the capstone in Radiant Servant, where every fifth take is full power and has a better chance of critting.
Really? Okay,
I'm
that's
pretty sure it
cool.
does, yeah.
So we're learning a lot today.
Yeah, the aura is really handy for a cleric, in almost all circumstances. I've seen people get killed by it because they either they attract unwanted attention or they try and get up next to the boss and heal the tank with it and get cleaved. But other than that, it tends to be really effective.
Yeah, but if you are incapped, you can heal yourself while incapped because it's just rolling. So I use it right now. If everything I fought was an ice flenser, then maybe I would go with the Flame Strike. But I take all the undead line. I take intense healing just because of the extra caster levels. Unyielding Sovereignty because that's extra handy. And that's about it in Radiant Servant. I take about 33. I also take, in Knight of the Chalice, which comes from Paladin, the same stuff and the stack because they're from different classes. So extra turning gives me more uses of turn undead, and I've also got improved turning, which gives you more levels. It's basically going to stack with your Bane of the Restless as well as your improved turning from Cleric.
Does the light damage stack?
It is, I believe it's a separate number. It doesn't really matter though, because it's so low that
Well, it's double the damage.
It's a hindrance. It's like
66
12.
D6. That's not bad.
From what?
Well, especially if you're talking about heroic levels, you can get that up. You can get that pretty quick. With an extra 18,
Yeah.
36 D6 to.
Where are you seeing 36? Where are you seeing the 36?
Divine Light has in Paladin Tier 1, the Katsu tree has 6, 12, 18d6 for its enhancement, and then the Morning Lord one has the same thing, 6, 8, or 6, 12, 18d6 light damage.
Yeah, I mean it's there. It's not a lot. If I'm turning something, it's dead.
That's
That's
fair.
the main thing. It's it's okay. It's not something that I count on. It's just extra. As far as Divine Disciple goes, though, I basically go up the whole light side, Divine Emissary of Light. Um, there's also a third option here that we haven't discussed, which was the Necro Cleric. Um, Necro Clerics are typically pure human, maxed wisdom. That's the one where you want to go up into those paying 3 points for one stat point range, and then put all your level ups into wisdom, which, as I've heard from one of the guys that runs with our guild fairly often, Budstein from Galanda, he plays clerics almost exclusively. I believe he's on the players council also, and he's probably the server's top DC cleric. Um, I believe he does necro, but he's always a pure cleric. Um, but yeah, it's pretty much min max or nothing. You want to go on the dark side. For my build, I'm doing something a little more kitschy, I guess. Light side is a few things. In the core, you have Divine Emissary Light, light energy spell power. You get Sunbolt in your spellbook, which is kind of handy. I use it occasionally just because it's extra damage, and it playing an arty as my main gets me in the habit of using kiting techniques. And if you kite things in a straight line, Sunbolt is one of the only light spells that will actually go through all of them. So it's kind of like a little ray gun that you can fire through groups. That being said, on Epic Elite, it's not going to do much more than about a third of hit point bars because it hits for around 2,000-3,000 even when meta magicked. I do spend quite a bit in light spell power, but I also do the universal spell power thing too. But I go up to the core all the way to tier 5. I have 31 AP spent, and my 31st AP is for the Sunburst, the core, tier 5. So in those, here's what I'm taking. I'm taking all of the universal crit chance. It's 4% universal crit. Energy Disciple as needed. I think I spent one just to get up to the next level. Spell power is +3 universal, +18 fire. Fire goes into the Epic Destinies. We'll get into that a little bit later. And more universal and more universal. So Divine Disciple is all about spell power and light SLAs. I use the Searing Light, and I use the Holy Smite. The Holy Smite has a handy secondary ability. And note about Holy Smite, if you go the Evocation DC route, Holy Smite can actually get to the point where it will blind things. It's a will save too, so things that don't have typically high will saves can get blinded, and blind is very, very useful. That being said, Sunburst in Divine Disciple also takes care of that. It's the same deal. So Sunbeam does blind effect as well. Basically, all the light stuff in here does blinding. It's just a matter of what works and what doesn't. So I went over Knight of the Chalice, Radiant Servant, Divine Disciple. I'm
It's worth
about...
noting too with light stuff. A lot of undead takes extra damage from light, particularly vampires.
Yeah, definitely. You'll see purple numbers on those vampires. So we've got Knight of the Chalice, Radiant Servant, Divine Disciple. Radiant Servant and Divine Disciple are about the same number of points. I do the extra in Knight of the Chalice. So here's the kicker, and this is why I can't afford to do Charisma spec.
I think you just muted yourself.
Yep, I had to cough. The sunburst that's added to your spellbook works differently than the sunburst that comes with the Morning Lord race. And it also works differently than the sunburst that druids get. And it also works differently than the sunburst that wizards get. And that is that it has no save at the moment. The cost is basically 1 point and spending 31 AP in Divine Disciple. But the sunburst does all of the effect that it has. And here's the text. Oozes and undead take 4 to 6 per caster level damage. Successful reflex save reduces the damage by half, negates the blindness. This blinds anything that can be blinded and kills anything that is vulnerable to light, like wraiths, vampires, wargs, shadows, and that's about it. The Sunbeam doesn't do the same thing, but it does do a blind. So this is how I can afford to do a charisma base. If this had a save, there's no way that it would be effective and would actually blind or get rid of vampires. So it's an effective way to keep me playing 18 cleric, basically. I would probably do something more like a DC caster if this had a save. But as it is, it's a very handy spell for Deathworms because all of the shadows are in there and they're vulnerable to Sunburst. And it's also handy for the new raid because Vampire Knights spawn every 3 minutes. So you throw a Sunburst, and as long as your group's coordinated enough to get them to stand still for a Sunburst, then they'll get hit by it and they'll get killed by it. That being said, my Turn Undead works on Epic Normal and Epic Hard on those vampires anyway, so that's fine.
So it seems like, if I might jump in here, that your build is pretty effective against undead between the turning and the light damage.
Yes, and where it is not undead, that's where the SLAs come in, and that's where my Epic Destiny fills the gaps, which is Divine Crusader. So that would probably be a good transition for
Destinies. I tend to, if I'm going more offensive, I found the Dragon Disciple to be pretty entertaining and pretty potent. I'd say if I want to go more healing, I like Unyielding Sentinel, just because you get a lot of hit points and you get renewal, which is pretty handy. Those are probably the two that I found to be the most effective. I didn't really spend a lot of time playing with Divine Crusader personally, but I know that's been a popular one as well.
It is marvelous. It's actually probably at the moment my favorite ED in general. Shirati's still pretty awesome, but yeah, it's great.
I should say too that the Exalted Angel is pretty good if you want to be more offensively based DC casting, because you get some extra DCs out of that as well, and you can play with some. There's some fun light damage stuff in there as well that you can play with.
And which one I didn't hear?
Exalted Angel.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The Judgment stuff does a lot of light. I think it's like, what is it, 10d 100 or something like that, light damage.
It's a big chunk. I mean, you'll see it. It's so cool to see a chain reaction go off when you judge one and you have judged the many. You kill one, it adds judgment to everything else. The damage would also kill it, and then those two stack the other damage on the things behind it. And it's great to see a chain reaction just kill a whole group of undead.
Yep. I mean,
you can never say no to wings.
As far as twists go, I generally twist in Energy Burst, Cocoon, and Evocation DCs out of Magister. Kind of my 3 typical twists.
And what I do is very similar. It's Cocoon as the tier 1, Energy Burst as my tier 4. That's just so hard to let go because it does so much damage every 20 seconds for a small amount of SP. It's probably one of the best damage per spell points, depending on how many things you're hitting, but typically you're hitting like 5. Best damage per spell points in the game. Energy Burst. And Red Dragon Heritage. I just get the extra fire spell power for Divine Crusader.
You turn your camera on facing something weird.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, as a I just want to cruise through past lives really quick. The wizard past lives are pretty good because you get spell penetration and the DC from the active feat, and pretty much anything gives you spell points. The cleric one, if you want to get some extra turning, most of the basics. The barbarian gets you extra hit points. Paladin gets you some heal amp, although I've never really found that to be a problem on a cleric. Let's take a few minutes to talk about gear. Maybe no more than 5 minutes.
Okay.
I would say for me, gear wise, I like the necklace out of Wayloon because it's +5 evocation DCs and +15 to spell power, the spellcraft skill, which is nice. We need to talk about skills. We'll talk about that after this.
There aren't enough points to do much. Put
Yeah.
all your skills in.
But we'll hold on to the fact. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
I would say that necklace. I like that necklace because it's pretty easy to get, and +5 your evocation DCs and 15% to your spell power for positive and bursting stuff, which is pretty nice. And then let's see what other gear. The gloves out of Reaver are pretty nice. I definitely like those because then you can have your devotion on something, which is good. So that's always a good option there. Pretty much anything. If you can at least have something that you can slot devotion on, if that way you don't have to hold a stick in case you have something else in your hands, which is good, particularly if you want to be doing some healing. Let's see. I would say this day and age with clerics, I like heavy armor because that gives you the MMR, which is nice. Which is why I made heavy armor for my cleric in green. Before that, I was mostly using robes. But
if you're leveling, a couple of good pieces of heavy are mainly raid loot, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot. If you're at 28, you're definitely going to want to go for the Shadow Dragon plate, just for the DR on it. But in general, any old suit of heavy nowadays will do good because the MRR on it is crazy good.
I'd also look for a heavy shield too, because that'll double your MMR values. You can use a tower shield, but, sort of, I think. I don't know how the MMR works if you're not proficient, but if nothing else, you can get the Madstone shield out of Reaver and get the same benefit. So, if you want to boost your MMR values, those are heavy armor and a heavy shield. And if you get a heavy shield with devotion on it, that's even better.
And any source of sheltering.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of basics that kind of go along with this. I don't know, is there anything gear-wise that kind of stands out for you? I'd say the light ring out of Haunted Halls is pretty nice too.
Yes, that thing is awesome, especially if you're using anything that is cheap to cast and frequent, like Divine SLAs. The Todd set for Undead turning is the only source of exceptional bonus for Turn Undead. Do I have time to go over sources of Turn Undead?
Go for it.
Okay, real quick. We have the Insightful bonus. There's only 2 sources of this right now, Drowned Priest Torch and the Epic Seraphim. We have exceptional bonuses, which are the Radiant Ring and the Tokala's Belt. Those are from the rings from Tower of Despair. Tokala's Belt is from one of the Shavrath quests. I forget which one.
Good in Tower of Despair too.
4 sides, also Tower. Yep, that's 3. The other sources are your Charisma modifier determines where you land on a specific chart that determines whether you get -4 or +4 to turn undead DCs. So if you have a Charisma bonus that nets you 20 modifier, you always end up in the +4 range, so that's a source of 4 total. If you have less Charisma, then you fluctuate more on that 8-point scale. It's either between no bonus, which is -4 to your DC check, all the way up to plus 22, I think. It's in the books, so if you actually have 3.5 D&D books, crack that open to look at your turn undead, because that chart's there. All that chart really means is it can be from -4 to +4 HD. And the way it works, real quickly, for anyone who's unfamiliar with Turn Undead and has just been confused by it.
Let's see if I can get this to work.
There it is. Oh, yeah. See, on the left, you got your turn check result, and on the right, it tells you the maximum hit die of the most powerful you can affect. So, if you result in, sorry, it's 22 or higher. I think you got to get at least a 1, but it's your level +4. So you always want to be in the +4 range, unless you know you're going to be fighting stuff that has CR that's lower than what you can get. So we've got 3 exceptional, we've got 2 insightful, we've got 4 from your charisma score. Now, isn't that kind of silly? I mean, you get 22 modifier, you get charisma in the 50s, and, well, that would be up into the 60s, and you're only getting +4 HD out of it. Now, it's not -4, so maybe you can consider that I'm getting 8 total HD benefit, but it's only +4. The only way I can justify on a turn build getting 2 levels of Paladin is that you can use enhancement points to buy back the 3 levels in Knight of the Chalice. So effectively, a 18-2 counts as a 21. So you got your 6 from your past lives, your 6 from Morning Lord, your 3 from Paladin, 3 from Cleric, plus your actual level. And your epic levels count up to 5 from your epic destiny. So all told, the maximum number of HD that you can get in the game, I believe at the moment, is 57.
What about
HD.
items?
Well, the exceptional bonus from the Todd is the only source for that. Oh, yeah, right.
Isn't there a Sacred and Hallowed?
Yes, let me go over that. Sacred is 2. Hallowed is adding to the total HD that you can turn. And then you have Eternal Faith and Silver Flame. All 4 of those do something different. I did a little write-up on the forum. I can put it in some show notes. But basically the best one is Eternal Faith. Silver Flame is the most expensive to craft. They all do separate benefits, but basically the highest that you can get as an enhancement bonus. I'm being put on the spot with this one, so I can't quite remember immediately what it is, but I think it's something like either 2 or 4 to the maximum HD check. That is, well, I got the gloves right here. 2. So Eternal Faith items increase the owner's effective level for the turning check by 2 and their maximum hit dice but turn by 2 and their total hit dice by 4. So that's about all you can get. Seraphim comes with Sacred and Hallowed, but they don't stack with Eternal Faith. And I had mentioned this when the loot was being previewed, I think, and what got removed was the Eternal Faith instead of the Sacred and Hallowed, the minimum level 1 things. Serves me right, I guess. But
yeah, no kidding.
It'd be cool to see more sources of this, because the highest CR that we can turn at the moment is 57. Now, that stops at zombies in Two-Toed Tobias. And the reason those guys are so low, I can only assume, is because, I know we're making the show run long, I apologize, but crunchy bits. The reason those are so low is because it was originally a level 4 quest, right? So I believe whatever is making these HD crank up is if it was an old monster, its HD stay equally low. if epified. For instance, everything in the Black Lock is fairly low. Most of that is turnable even on the Epic Elite. But you'll go up to Toad Tobias, and the highest thing you can turn is the zombies. Once you get into things like Study and Sable, you'll see the CRs go from 55 to 73. Completely out of range. So you can go in there on Epic Hard, and things are a little bit more manageable, but that's about it. So that is the disclaimer I should say with Turn Undead. If you're building for Turn Undead,
Go big or go home.
Yeah, you have to go big. Expect to use your bursts and your Radiant Aura, because that's a lot of your benefit. You can cast a burst in the middle of a anti-magic aura too, which is handy. So that's basically all of the sources for it. It will let you clean up on Epic Hard. I have 40 uses of Turn Undead. I can run into any Epic Hard quest and just mash the Turn Undead button and clear rooms. And that's kind of how it used to be at level 8. That was kind of the cool part about going into the lairs with the Cleric. You can Turn Undead and everything goes away. But just don't expect it to work too well in Epic Elite.
Say turning, and then we'll move on. Turning is kind of one of those things that if you spend the points in it and you do some investment, you can get it to be really effective. But anything short of that, it's almost non-existently effective. It's kind of a problem.
And it is still very situational. So remember that you are still a healer and not just a Turn Undeader.
Presumably. Skills really quick. I would say heal, concentration, and spellcraft are kind of my top 3. I like getting jump and I like getting balance, but I generally don't have skill points for those. So, I don't know if you have any skills that kind of jump out at you more so than those ones.
No. If you can afford it, UMD, but you're not going to get a ton of it, and the fact that you're wearing heavy armor means that you're going to have to gear slot spell failure if you want to use GH scrolls or teleport scrolls.
Generally speaking, the thing that people UMD most are divine scrolls anyway, so.
Yeah.
You can cast.
Oh, side note, I forgot to mention, I didn't want to interrupt earlier, the heal scrolls do work within Intercession and I believe Anti-Magic Aura. So if you're a healer, you were mentioning that you use wands. Well, now's a great time to have a lot of wands because...
Mostly scrolls, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're very tiny, but you want to have a row of Intercession options, because currently Intercession Ward does not work in the Death Knight's aura. So you can still get that.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if it's how Intercession Ward is supposed to work, because I'm pretty sure it works on the quells effectively, but there's a couple places where you can get a little aura where it's really a short aura. It's only like 5 seconds or so.
Right.
It's enough to be noticeable, that's for sure. I think with that, that's some really good tips on building Cassie kind of clerics. We'll move on and wrap this sucker up. See, just some comments I wanted to mention from our last show on new player integration. Mistral said, what a great show. Her guild has been running a few newbie-friendly raids lately. Thanks for sharing ideas and insights that they can use. Found that you can prevent chaos by at least giving some direction and instructions to follow. It keeps people from freelancing and gives focus point for the raid and quest, which I think is something I pointed out. And I'd say, especially when a new raid with Market Death, man, giving people a specific assignment really helps focus people on a raid. And particularly when you're trying to learn a new raid, so you don't have to try and figure everything out all at the same time. It can really help people with that. Someone else said something that they kind of despise is when they ask a simple question, instead of giving a straight answer, all they hear is DDO Wiki, DDO Wiki, DDO Wiki. And I would say that can certainly be frustrating, and I can certainly understand that. I would say just be aware that there are some things that people just don't know off the top of their heads.
But also follow that advice.
Yeah, I mean, DDO Wiki can be
if
great.
If 3 people tell you DDO Wiki, that means go there.
Yeah, particularly when we're talking about something like, hey, where is this thing? Some people can't necessarily articulate that. Um, I'm one of the people who could, and I can draw a map in my head and tell you how to get there from point A to point B. But a lot of people you gotta remember, a lot of people navigate by kind of by seeing it, so it's harder for them to just tell you where it is without actually just showing you, and they may not be able to show you because they might be busy with something else. So be aware of stuff like that.
Yeah, if it's directions, I would normally say, yeah, here's how you get there. Go to the bank, and then there's a gate behind it. That's Sane Asylum.
Yeah, so just be aware that people don't necessarily. It's not that they don't necessarily know, but maybe they can't articulate something like that as well. But I understand they can be kind of frustrating that you want a quick answer and all you get is go look this up. Um, and they also mentioned like alt tabbing out and stuff like that. You can play DDO in a window, which is the way that I've always done it. You play in windowed mode so that you can still have your taskbar if you're in Windows or whatever, and have other windows that you can access really easily. So if you don't play in a window, you can consider that. I'm not saying you have to, but that's an
I do
option.
that also.
I found that to be really helpful in that regard.
Definitely. It's easier to switch. There's less of a GPU initialization flicker. It just remains in a window.
Yep. Survey question of the week comes from Dick Tina. What is your favorite music in DDO? I'm going to say the Orchard Quest now, but if you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said Finding the Path in Inspired Quarter. But I really liked the music in the Orchard. Do you have some favorite music?
Yes. The new Three Barrel Cove stuff is great. I think my favorite, though, is still the song that you see when you go out to the bats in the Vale. The song, it's kind of like synthy, and I know I've heard it in a couple of other places, but the new Orchard stuff sounds a lot like it. It's kind of dark wave, I guess. But yeah, I like that song. That's my favorite.
Awesome. With that, we're going to close out the show here. So thanks for Lich for joining me and talking Clerics, and particularly sharing your insights on turning. Thanks for listening to the show, and thanks for all the other folks that are contributing to the show. Thanks to Turbine and Wizards for making DDO and D&D, and thanks for Cybers for hosting the podcast. You can hit us up at DDOCast.com for show notes, our calendar, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. If you'd like to be part of the show or just say hi, you can email us at DDOcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for latest cast updates. The closing tip from the week comes from Azazel. There's a lot of Z's in that name. I thought Daily Dice was once per day per account, but knows now it can be used for each server once per day. Very true and very handy. And if they ever merge the servers, I'm going to have a lot of XP gems on one server or the other. So
Yeah, I do my gold rolls weekly just to make sure that I don't get 100 and something cool, because I might actually pay for a server transfer if that's the case.
That would, I guess, certainly be an option. But with that, thanks for listening, folks. Have fun. May all your attack rolls be crits. All your chest level appropriate. Have fun. And don't forget to tip your clerics.